Okay, so get ready because we're diving into one of the most gripping spy cases, I think, of the 20th century.
Oh,
The
yeah,
Rosenberg spy case.
absolutely.
We're talking atomic secrets, Cold War paranoia,
Mm.
and a trial that, I mean, just captivated the nation.
It's one of those stories that, just has everything.
Yeah.
It's got the drama, it's got the historical
It's
significance.
got mystery,
Yeah.
intrigue.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you think you know the story, and then
Yeah.
you start digging into it and you
Tickle
realize
ears.
there's so much more there.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating to me about this case is how much it reflects like the anxieties of the time. We're talking about the early years of the Cold War.
Right.
The fear of communist infiltration in the US was very real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've shared some incredible sources with us for this deep dive. I mean,
Right.
declassified documents, court transcripts, even personal accounts.
Yeah, we're going deep on this one.
Yeah, so we're going to unpack all of it and really try to understand the story of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg.
Let's get into it.
So let's start at the beginning with their journey from the Lower East Side of New York City to the center of this atomic storm.
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Both Ethel and Julius grew up in poverty, children of Jewish immigrants in a neighborhood teeming with, communist ideology, especially during the Depression.
Right.
And so that environment really shaped their worldview. I think especially for Julius.
Okay.
He was very passionate about social justice, about fighting fascism. He even joined the Young Communist League while he was studying electrical engineering.
So those engineering skills that he was honing, that's what would eventually kind of put him on the map for Soviet intelligence.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, during World War II, Julius is working as an engineer for the Army Signal Corps.
The
Now, even though the U.S. and the Soviet Union were allies at the time, right, fighting together against the Nazis,
right.
there was still this underlying mistrust brewing.
So you're telling me that while we're fighting alongside the Soviets, they're already trying to steal our secrets?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were running this massive espionage network in the U.S., aiming to get any technological advantage they could.
Wow.
They saw Julius as a valuable asset with his skills and his connections.
So how do they even approach him? I mean, was this like a scene out of a spy movie?
Well, so picture this. It's Labor Day in 1942. There's this patriotic rally in Central Park, right?
Great.
Very all-American scene. And right in the middle of it, a Soviet intelligence officer approaches Julius and recruits him to become a spy.
Hold on, in broad daylight?
Yeah, bold move.
That's a bold move.
But it speaks to just how deeply embedded these networks were. They were operating right under our noses.
Yeah.
And Julius, motivated by his communist ideals and this desire to help the Soviets defeat Hitler, he agrees to become a spy, his code name, Liberal.
Liberal. Okay, that's interesting. It makes you think about the thinking behind that, right? Like the layers of meaning they might be playing with.
Yeah, the irony is not lost on us.
Right, exactly. So what kind of information is Julius passing along? I mean, in these early days?
So he starts small, sharing information about military technology blueprints, even a model of a proximity fuse detonator.
Okay.
Now, a proximity fuse this is a device that detonates an explosive when it gets close to its target.
Okay.
It was cutting-edge technology at the time, and the Soviets were very interested in it.
So this is serious stuff. He's not just handing over, some random papers. He's giving them access to advanced weaponry.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes you think about the weight of those decisions, right? The potential consequences he must have been aware of.
Yeah, and his commitment to this cause, whatever it was at the time, deepens even more when he learns that his brother-in-law, David Greenglass, is assigned to work on the top-secret Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Los Alamos, a birthplace of the atomic bomb.
This is where the story takes a turn, right?
Wow, yeah.
We're talking about the race to build the atomic bomb.
Exactly. The stakes just got a whole lot higher. And Julius saw an opportunity to provide the Soviets with information that could change the course of history.
Wow.
He convinces David to become a spy, focusing on gathering details about this mysterious new weapon.
So they were using a torn Jello box as a signal for their clandestine meetings, each carrying a matching half.
Yeah, it sounds a little strange, right?
I mean, a torn Jello box, it seems almost too simple for something so high stakes.
It makes you wonder if that detail was exaggerated over time, to add a bit of intrigue. to the story.
Right.
But hey, it definitely makes it memorable.
It does. So what did David actually provide to Julius?
He provided sketches of explosive lenses,
Okay.
a crucial component of the bomb's detonation. They weren't detailed blueprints, but they offered valuable insights into the bomb's design.
So as World War II is ending, Julius is handing over information that will help the Soviets develop their own atomic bomb.
Yeah, it's a game changer. The implications are huge.
Huge. Did Ethel know about all of this at this point?
Well, at this point, Ethel was focused on raising their young son, Michael, and while there's evidence that she knew about some of Julius's activities, it's unclear how much she really knew about the extent of his espionage.
Okay.
That part of the story, as you'll see, becomes really important later on.
Okay, so we've got Julius driven by ideology, risking everything to pass atomic secrets to the Soviets. But what happens next? How does this all unravel?
Well, World War II ends, but a new conflict is brewing, the Cold War.
Right.
And with the Soviets successfully testing their own atomic bomb in 1949,
Oh boy.
the stakes get even higher. The U.S. is in shock. They had no idea. The Soviets were so close to developing their own bomb, the search for the source of the leak intensifies,
Yeah.
and the Rosenbergs find themselves caught in the crosshairs.
It gets really intense here, right? I mean, we're talking about the Red Scare, McCarthyism, a nation on edge.
Absolutely. And for the Rosenbergs, this growing anti-communist sentiment would have devastating consequences.
This is just the beginning of our deep dive, and I can already tell there are going to be some twists and turns ahead.
Oh yeah, buckle up.
Stay with us as we explore the events that led to the Rosenbergs' arrests, the dramatic trial that unfolded, and the lasting legacy of a case that continues to generate debate and controversy even today.
It's a story that you won't want to miss.
Stick with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we left off with the Soviets successfully testing their own atomic bomb in 1949, sending shockwaves through the U.S. government. You know,
I mean, it was a huge wake-up call.
right.
For the U.S., they realized they were no longer the only ones with this incredibly powerful weapon.
The race for nuclear supremacy is on, and the hunt for those responsible for leaking atomic secrets intensifies.
And the pressure is mounting
Right,
to
man.
find out who betrayed the country.
Absolutely. And remember, this is all happening as the Red Scare is gripping the nation. I mean, the fear of communism is rampant.
Oh, yeah. Fueled by Senator Joseph McCarthy's accusations of communist infiltration in the government.
Right. So you've got this backdrop of suspicion and fear, and then you have the very real threat of Soviet espionage.
It was a recipe for chaos.
Yeah. So how did the FBI even begin to close in on the Rosenbergs?
Well, a key turning point came with the defection of Elizabeth Bentley,
Okay.
a Soviet spy who turned herself in to the FBI in 1945.
Wow.
And she provided a list of names, including several high-ranking officials who had been passing information to the Soviets.
So this is a major break for the FBI. I mean, they're getting inside information from someone who was actually part of the Soviet spy network. Did she name Julius?
No, Julius's name wasn't on her list. But Bentley's defection sent shockwaves through the Soviet intelligence community. They knew they needed to tighten security and protect their valuable assets, especially those with knowledge of the atomic bomb.
Makes sense. They're in damage control mode, trying to plug the leaks. But the FBI now knows about the Soviets' extensive spy network, and they're on high alert what happens next.
Well, the FBI had another secret weapon up their sleeve, a project so classified that its existence wasn't even acknowledged until decades later, the Venona Project.
Okay, the Venona Project, I've heard whispers about this. Fill us in. What was it all about?
Imagine having a window into the secret communications of your adversary. That's essentially what Venona was.
Okay.
It was a top-secret effort to decrypt coded messages sent between Moscow and its spies in the U.S.
So the FBI is reading the Soviets' mail, essentially.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty much. And this project ran for years, and it provided invaluable insights into Soviet espionage activities.
So did they find anything about Julius in those messages?
Yes, the Venona transcripts did confirm Julius's involvement in espionage, although the specific details remained classified for many years.
So they had this smoking gun, but they couldn't reveal it.
Exactly. The problem for the FBI was that they couldn't reveal the existence of Venona without compromising their intelligence gathering operations. So while they had this incredible source of information, they couldn't use it directly in court.
So they're playing this delicate balancing act. They need to use the information to catch the spies, but they can't reveal how they got the information. That's got to be frustrating.
It was a tough spot to be in, but they were making progress. They were getting closer to the Rosenbergs. Remember Julius's brother-in-law, David Greenglass, who had been recruited to spy at Los Alamos?
Yeah.
Well, the FBI was investigating some missing uranium from the Manhattan Project, and David, who had taken some uranium as a souvenir, panicked.
Oh, wow. That's not a good souvenir to have lying around when the FBI's sniffing around.
No, it wasn't a good look.
Yeah.
Julius urged him to flee the country, but David refused, unwilling to leave his wife and child behind.
Right.
And then another piece of the puzzle falls into place. Klaus Fuchs, a German-born British physicist who had worked on the Manhattan Project, is arrested.
Okay.
Fuchs confesses to spying for the Soviets and implicates Harry Gold, the courier who had met with David Greenglass.
So the dominoes are starting to fall. Fuchs to Gold to Greenglass, and Greenglass leads them to Julius.
Exactly. David, under immense pressure from the FBI and fearing for his wife's safety, made a fateful decision. He agreed to cooperate with the FBI and testify against Julius.
Wow, talk about a betrayal.
And to make matters worse, he revised his story to implicate Ethel as well, claiming that she had typed up his notes about the bomb.
So he throws Ethel under the bus to save himself and his wife. It's a betrayal on multiple levels, but was there any evidence to support this claim about Ethel?
That's where things get murky. There was no independent corroboration of David's claims about Ethel's involvement later. As you'll see, he admitted to lying about this detail, but at the time, his testimony was incredibly damaging. It gave the FBI the leverage they needed to build a stronger case against both Rosenbergs.
It paints a picture of the pressure cooker. They were all in the fear and desperation driving their decisions. So what happens next? Do they arrest the Rosenbergs based on Greenglass's testimony?
Yes, on July 17, 1950, FBI agents arrested Julius in a dramatic raid on their apartment. Ethel was arrested a few weeks later. The couple, now facing charges of conspiracy to commit espionage, were thrust into the center of a media frenzy.
And remember, this is all happening against the backdrop of the Korean War, which had just begun. The fear of communism was at a fever pitch. Public opinion is already against them. It must have felt like the walls were closing in.
It was a very difficult time to be accused of being a communist sympathizer, let alone a spy.
So the Rosenbergs became scapegoats, symbols of the perceived communist threat within the U.S., and their trial, which began in March 1951, was a media sensation.
It was a trial of the century.
Everyone was watching, eager to see how this story would unfold. This is where it gets really interesting. We've got the arrests, the looming trial, and this intense political climate. What happens in the courtroom? Do the Rosenbergs fight the charges?
Well, on the advice of their attorney, Manny Block, they chose to plead the Fifth Amendment, refusing to answer questions about their past involvement with the Communist Party or their alleged espionage activities.
So they're staying silent, not cooperating with the investigation. It's a risky move, right? I mean, doesn't that make them look guilty?
It was a legally sound strategy, but it was definitely a gamble. Their silence, while protecting them from self-incrimination, was also perceived by many, including the jury, as an admission of guilt. It played right into the narrative that the prosecution was building.
And what was that narrative? How did the prosecution present their case?
The prosecution, led by Irving Sapol, painted a picture of the Rosenbergs as cold-hearted traitors who had betrayed their country for ideological reasons. They relied heavily on David Greenglass's testimony, which, despite its inconsistencies, provided a compelling narrative for the jury. They described this elaborate spying with Julius at the center, feeding vital information to the Soviets, information that had allowed them to develop their own atomic bomb.
And what about Ethel? How did they portray her role in all of this?
They focused on Greenglass's claim that Ethel had typed up his notes about the bomb, directly implicating her in the espionage. The prosecution argued that she wasn't just aware of Julius's activities, she was an active participant, a willing co-conspirator in this act of treason.
So the prosecution is building this case based on Greenglass's testimony and this idea that the Rosenbergs were willing to sacrifice their country for their communist ideals.
Yeah.
But what about the defense? How did they counter these arguments?
The defense team faced an uphill battle. They tried to discredit Greenglass, portraying him as a disgruntled relative seeking revenge, and a lighter sentence for himself. They pointed out inconsistencies in his testimony and highlighted the lack of any physical evidence directly linking Ethel to the espionage, but their efforts were largely overshadowed by the political climate and the emotionally charged nature of the case.
It's starting to feel like the verdict is a foregone conclusion, with the weight of public opinion against them and this damning testimony from Greenglass. Do the Rosenbergs have any chance of being acquitted?
Unfortunately, the odds were stacked against them. The jury, swayed by the political climate, the emotional weight of the charges, and Greenglass's testimony, found both Ethel and Julius guilty. The judge, Irving Kaufman, known for his hardline stance against communism, handed down the harshest sentence possible: death.
Death. Wow, that's intense. Just shows how high the stakes were in this case, how seriously the government was taking the threat of communist espionage. But wasn't there a huge public outcry over the sentence? Weren't there appeals?
Yes, the sentence sparked outrage and protests, both in the U.S. and internationally. There were appeals pleas for clemency, even interventions from world leaders, but nothing swayed the U.S. government. The Rosenbergs, maintaining their innocence, refused to confess in exchange for lighter sentences. They insisted that they were victims of a political witch hunt scapegoats in a climate of fear and paranoia.
So even facing execution, they refused to admit to crimes they maintained they didn't commit. That's a powerful statement about their convictions, their belief in their own innocence. What happened next were they executed?
Yes, despite international pressure and pleas for clemency, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg were executed on June 19, 1953. They went to their deaths, proclaiming their innocence, leaving behind two young sons who would grow up grappling with the legacy of their parents' case.
It's a tragic end to a story that began with idealism and a desire to fight injustice. It's a reminder of the devastating consequences of political extremism and the human cost of Cold War paranoia.
And it raises so many questions that continue to be debated even today. Was the sentence justified? Was Ethel truly a co-conspirator? Or was she a victim of circumstance caught in the crossfire? Was the trial fair? Or was it influenced by the political climate?
These are the questions we'll be exploring as we continue our deep dive into the Rosenberg case. Stay with us as we delve into the aftermath of the trial, the lingering questions about their guilt or innocence, and the lasting impact this case had on American society. You know, it's hard to believe that even after the trial and the executions, the story of the Rosenbergs doesn't end there.
Right. It's like this weight hanging over everything.
Yeah, and it feels like we've gone through this whole emotional roller coaster with them, right? From those idealistic beginnings to that tragic ending.
Absolutely.
But there's more to uncover, right?
The Rosenberg case became the symbol of Cold War paranoia, this stark reminder of how fear and ideology can intersect with the justice system. But as the years passed and the Cold War faded into history, new evidence emerged that challenged the narrative that had been so carefully constructed during the trial.
You're talking about the Venona transcripts, right? The
Yeah.
ones that confirm Julius's espionage activity.
Exactly. Those transcripts were finally declassified in the 1990s.
Right.
And they provided a whole new perspective on the case.
What did those transcripts reveal? I mean, did they shed any new light on Ethel's involvement?
Well, the Venona project, that top secret code-breaking effort we talked about earlier,
Right.
it played a significant role in reshaping our understanding of the case, while the transcripts confirmed Julius's role as a spy. They didn't provide any concrete evidence of Ethel's direct involvement in espionage.
So those transcripts, hidden away for decades, actually supported the defense's argument that Ethel's role was minimal, if any.
That's right. And it makes you wonder how the trial might have played out if that information had been available at the time.
Oh, absolutely. But there's also David Greenglass's confession, right? Years later, he admitted to lying about Ethel typing up those notes.
Yeah, that was a bombshell in a 2001 interview. David Greenglass admitted that he had lied about Ethel's involvement in typing up his notes about the bomb. He claimed that he had been pressured by the FBI to implicate his sister, hoping to protect his wife Ruth from prosecution.
Wow, to think that this crucial detail, the one that seemingly tied Ethel to the espionage, was fabricated.
It was a huge revelation.
Yeah, it casts a whole new shadow over the trial and the verdict. It makes you question everything.
Absolutely.
Was David driven by guilt? Was he trying to clear his conscience after all those years?
It's hard to know for sure what motivated Greenglass's confession. Some believe he was genuinely remorseful, seeking to right a wrong. Others believe he was trying to revise history to soften his own role in the events that led to the Rosenbergs' execution.
Right.
Whatever his motivations, his confession opened up a Pandora's box of questions about the fairness of the trial and the reliability of the evidence used to convict Ethel.
Yeah, and it's mind-boggling to think that such a pivotal piece of evidence was based on a lie. It makes you wonder how much the trial was shaped by political pressure, personal agendas, and fear. What does this all mean for our understanding of the case?
Yeah.
I mean, could we say with certainty whether Ethel was guilty or innocent?
That's the difficult part. Even with these revelations, the Rosenberg case remains shrouded in ambiguity, while the Venona transcripts and Greenglass's confession cast serious doubt on Ethel's active participation in espionage. They don't definitively prove her innocence. There's still debate among historians and legal scholars about the extent of her knowledge and involvement.
So we're left with this unresolved puzzle. Julius's espionage is confirmed, but Ethel's role remains a mystery.
It's a reminder that history isn't always clear-cut.
Right.
That sometimes the truth is elusive, even with access to declassified documents and first-hand accounts.
Yeah, but there's value in examining these complexities, right? I mean, what can we learn from the Rosenberg case, even with all of its unanswered questions?
Well, I think the Rosenberg case serves as this cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, government secrecy, and the manipulation of public fear for political gain.
Right.
It reminds us that even in a democracy, the pursuit of justice can be distorted by political agendas and ideological conflicts.
It also highlights the importance of critical thinking and skepticism,
Hmm.
especially when we're presented with official narratives or seemingly irrefutable evidence. The Rosenberg case shows us that things are not always what they seem. It encourages us to dig deeper, to question assumptions, and to consider multiple perspectives before forming our own conclusions.
Absolutely. And we can't forget the human cost of these historical events. Two young boys lost their parents.
Right.
And countless lives were irrevocably changed by the accusations, the
Yeah.
trial, and the executions. The Rosenberg case is a stark reminder that history isn't just about dates and facts, it's about real people whose lives were caught up in the tides of global events and ideological conflicts.
This deep dive into the Rosenberg case has been a journey through some of the darkest chapters of American history. It's a story about betrayal, espionage, political maneuvering, and the enduring power of secrets. But it's also been a story about resilience, the fight for justice, and the complexities of truth.
It's a story that continues to resonate, prompting us to reflect on the delicate balance between national security and individual rights, the importance of due process, and the dangers of allowing fear and prejudice to shape our judgments.
So as you continue your own exploration of the Cold War, remember the Rosenbergs, remember the complexities of their story, the unanswered questions, and the lessons we can learn from their tragic fate. History is never truly settled. And it's up to each of us to keep asking questions, to seek understanding, and to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a fascinating journey.